What's up, guys? I'm Craig, and in this video, I'm going to show you how to build your very own voice assistant that uses AI to schedule appointments. So this is an assistant that can answer calls from clients or customers and interact with them, and then check your calendar and schedule appointments or suggest if the client wants a time that's busy, suggest an alternate time, and ultimately get that appointment set. So let's just look at a high level overview of the assistant, and then we're going to go build it step by step together. So let's start with Vapi. So we are going to build an appointment setter. I'm actually going to use a template that they have and just modify it a little bit. So this is what's going to interact with our caller on the phone. From there, we are going to take the information from that call. And while we're still on the call, we're going to pass that data into make.com. And that's what you're going to see here. We're going to use a webhook to get that data from Vapi. We're then going to, so the data that we're going to bring over is going to be the client's name, the time, the date and time that they would like to meet, and the purpose of their visit. And we could obviously change that or adapt that or customize it or whatever. But that's what we've got set up right now. We're then going to take that information and pass it into OpenAI to convert whatever date and time they say into a date time format that we can use. So for example, on the call, they might say, yeah, I'd like to meet tomorrow at 1 p.m. Well, we don't know what tomorrow means. So we're going to pass what they say into OpenAI and then use what the current time is to have the AI determine what time they actually want and what day they actually want to meet. We're then going to check their requested date and time against our calendar using this Google Calendar module, and we'll see if we're busy at that time. From there, we're going to go to this router, and this router will go one of two directions depending on whether we're busy or not. So if the time that they've asked for is not busy, then we'll go ahead and schedule that appointment using a different Google Calendar module to schedule an appointment. And then we will return a response to Vapi confirming that the appointment was booked. And so the voice assistant can provide that confirmation to the customer at the end of the call. If the time that they've requested is busy, then this router is going to take us down a different path. And we're going to look at that day and see what other openings we have and use OpenAI to suggest three, if there's three available, three alternate time slots that may work. And we're going to use this webhook response to send those alternate times back to Vapi and have it suggest those to the caller. So back on the Vapi side, if they like one of those appointments, if they say, yeah, that time will work, then we'll come back through here again and ultimately schedule the appointment and provide that confirmation to them. So let's go ahead and dive into building this. So we're going to start with a new assistant, create a new assistant. So if you've built assistants, voice assistants in Vapi before, you know that they have some pre-populated templates that you can use. We can use an appointment setter. In this case, we're going to only slightly modify it, and I'll go through that here in a second. Okay, so I'm going to name my assistant. I'm going to use the appointment setter template and create that. Okay, and so in this case, it's an appointment setter that they built for a dental office called Mary's Dental. So we're going to start with that. The prompt, I could make this a lot better, but I'm going to only slightly modify it in this example. So you can see here that in their prompt, in the model, they've got a first message. This is Mary from Mary's Dental. How can I assist you? And then they've got some basic instructions on the prompt. We're not going to worry about that too much right now. There's a lot we could change here. I am just going to add a bit to the prompt to help, as I've gone through this, to help on this side. I'm just going to go add a bit to this prompt here that will do two things. One is I'm asking the voice assistant to not try and figure out what time they mean. So if they say tomorrow at 1 p.m., I don't want the Vapi model to try to figure out what time that is. I want OpenAI to do that in my make scenario. So that's one thing I'm telling it. And then telling it that it's going to get a confirmation back, yes or no, whether that appointment is available and booked or what the alternate times are. So I just want to make sure it's using that information that comes back from make.com and not just sort of like winging it and making stuff up, because it can do that. I'm going to change this to 4.0 cluster. I don't have knowledge base for this. And I'm going to leave pretty much everything else the same, except I'm going to change the voice. I'm going to change the voice to 11 Labs and Sarah. Okay. So that's pretty much it for the voice assistant on the Vapi side. I now need to build a function that can interact with my webhook in make.com. So we're going to hit publish to save that. And then I'm going to go here under tools. We're going to create a new tool, a makes tool. And then I need a URL for the webhook. So now we're going to go over to make.com and I'm going to, let's save these. So once I'm in make.com, I'm going to create a new scenario. I'm going to rename this Vapi appointment scheduler. And I'm going to start it with a webhook trigger. So this is going to be a custom webhook trigger. And from there, I can create the webhook. I don't need to provide any IP restrictions. So I'm going to save that. And now this webhook is listening for data from Vapi so it can figure out the data structure. So now we're going to go back to Vapi. I forgot to grab this URL. So I grab this URL from the webhook. I can paste that in here and save that and then click next. Okay, so here's where I'm going to define the variables that this function is going to use to gather the data that I want from my customers. So the three things I'm looking for in this caller is to collect the name of the person. I want to know the purpose of their visit, and I want to know what time they would like to meet. So I'm going to call this first variable caller name and say, this is the name of the caller. Save. Now I'm going to add a second property. I'm going to call this requested date. And I'm going to say, this is the requested day and time of the appointment as stated by the caller. And the last one I'm going to create is, I'm going to call it appointment purpose. And this is the purpose of the appointment. So those are pretty straightforward, but I want all three of those to be able to pass over to make.com. Okay, now I'm going to provide a name for my function. I'll call it appointment setter 2, because I've already built one like this. And the description, this is actually really important. It is a prompt that helps the function know what it's doing. I'm saying this tool is going to capture the day and time for a caller, run this tool when we have the customer's name, the requested appointment day and time, and the purpose provided by the caller. It will then return a confirmation using this same function back to tell you it's either available and booked, or it will give you alternative times if it wasn't available. Okay, so now that I've got my function created, appointment setter 2, I can go back to my assistant. And under functions, I'm going to grab this tool. Let's see, appointment setter 2. I'm going to also enable and call function, and that's all good. So I'm not going to change anything else on the Vapi side. I'm just going to hit publish. So you can see on the make side, the webhook is still waiting for data. So I'm actually going to go just run through a quick test of my assistant so far. So it will send the data over to Vapi. So we've already got the webhook set up. And now the next thing we're going to do is take the information that the caller gave us in terms of what day and time they want and pass that into OpenAI to figure out what time it really is. So I'm creating a completion in OpenAI. The model I'm going to use is, I'm going to give it a very simple user prompt. Your task is to convert the current date and time to Eastern New York. So I'm asking it to do two things: to interpret the time that the customer gave and to give it to me in Eastern time. So take the customer's requested appointment time and accurately convert it into date time format using the current time. So current time is going to be something that I give it. For example, the customer may say tomorrow at 2 p.m., Wednesday at 4 p.m. Use the current date and time when this actually runs to convert that into a real time that I can use elsewhere. Okay, so that's the prompt. And then the data we need to give it are two things: current date time. And for that, I'm going to go into this date and time tab and give it the variable now. So anytime this runs, it's going to tell it the exact date and time. And then I'm going to give it callers requested date time. And for this, I'm going to go back to my webhook variable, tool calls, function, arguments, requested date. Okay, the last thing I'm going to do in this prompt is I'm going to ask it to give me this output in JSON formatting. This will make it much easier. Rather than getting a paragraph from ChatGPT, I'm going to get a variable with the date and time in it. I can call this a string. So I'm going to say only output the customer's requested converted date and time in JSON format as follows. So I'm going to have a variable called converted date and then a string. So now that I am asking for JSON in the output, I need to go to the advanced settings in this module, change the response format to JSON object, and ask it to parse the response. That will give me that variable populated with the date. So let's click OK and let's test this thing. So let's go run this module only. And let's say that we have given it tomorrow at 2 p.m. Let's see what it comes up with. So the result here is, here's our converted date variable, and it has given us 2024, 12/7, that's tomorrow, 1400 hours. So it is working. The next step is I want to check my calendar and see if that time is busy. So we're going to add a module. It's going to be a Google Calendar module, and you're going to scroll all the way to the bottom and go get free busy information. And this one's going to be really simple as well. I've already connected to my Google account. Okay, so in this get free busy module, we're going to give it two times, a start time and an end time, and ask it to see if we have anything else going on in that window of time. So the minimum time that I'm going to give it is just this converted date. That's the date and time I wanted to check, to start checking on the calendar. And then the maximum time is going to be however long we expect our customer's appointment to be. We want to use that, add that amount on, and that's our maximum time. So in this case, let's say everything we do is 1 hour appointments. You could obviously have 15-minute appointments, 30-minute, 45. But in this case, let's say everything's a 1 hour appointment. And so what I can do in here is go back to this date and time thing and grab add hours. If I was doing like a 30-minute appointment window, I could do grab minute or add minutes. So add hours, and then I'm just going to put this converted date and time, same thing as up here. And because I'm adding hours, I'll just put a 1. So that's going to add 1 hour to whatever this date and time is. So this module will go and check if the customer asks for, an appointment tomorrow at 2 p.m. It's going to first, in the OpenAI module, it figured out what tomorrow means, what date that actually is. And in this module, it's going to go check from 2 p.m. to, in this case, 3 p.m. because we put 1 hour in there, and see if we have anything else going on during those times. You also need to give it your calendar. So that should be it. So to test this, I'm going to go grab the output from the last module, which is this right here. And then I'm going to go run this module only, put that date in. So that's 2 p.m. tomorrow. And let's go check our calendar and see if we actually have something at 2 p.m. tomorrow. We do. Okay, that's good. So when we run this, it should come up with a conflict. So here's my output, calendars, busy, and there's a 1. So there is something in that array. It sees a conflict from 2 to 3, which is accurate. Let's go make that time free and see what it comes up with. So if I run it again with that same time, now we should have an empty array. And we do. There's nothing there. If I had 2 appointments, 2 different blocks that were busy in that time, it would give me an array with 2 items in it. Okay, so now we're going to, well, the first thing I'm going to do is rename these because it makes it less confusing. Info is okay, so now we have a time and we know whether we're busy at that time. So here's where we're going to add a router. So you can actually go down here to flow control and add a router, bring that up here. The router is going to allow me to have 2 different paths depending on, some conditions that I set. So if I just click that plus, it'll create 2 legs here. If I had more conditions, I could create more legs, but I don't. So the first one, before we put anything up here, we're going to say this is if the time slot is free. This is what we want it to do. And then this will be if the time slot is busy, where we want it to go. So we're going to click on this connection here, and that will allow us to set up a filter. Let's call this free. And let's say that the condition is we have an array here from our calendar, this busy array. So if I click that, I'm going to set the condition to be, let's go down to the array operators. And I'm going to say, is the array length equal to 0? So it's an empty array. That means I have no conflicts. If that's true, it's going to go down here. And what do we want it to do? We want it to schedule an appointment. So we're going to go to Google Calendar, create an event, select your calendar ID. And what do I want to name this event? I'm going to call this appointment with, and then I'm going to grab the name of the caller from my webhook. So that was here under tool calls, function, arguments, caller name. So this will name the appointment with Bob or Sally or whoever. It's not an all-day event. The start date. Okay, so here is where I'm going to take my converted date from OpenAI. That is going to be the start date for this appointment. And then I could either give it an end date or I could give it a duration. In this case, I'm just going to do a duration. So it's 1 hour long. And then I want to do one other thing. I want to add the description. I want to add a description that, remember, we collected the purpose of the appointment from the caller. So I'm going to click advanced settings. You can go down to description and bring in appointment purpose like that. It's going to set the time as busy. I could, if I wanted to set a reminder, I could set that in here. Okay. So there you have it. So let's test this. So right now, let's go check my calendar. I've got nothing at 2. So let's go back and run this module. And I'm going to give it this date and time, tomorrow at 2 p.m. And I could also give it the caller name. Jane called and wanted a consultation. And I run that. And if I go check my calendar, I now have an appointment with Jane tomorrow at 2. So everything is working so far. The last thing I want to do on this leg where the time slot was free and we went ahead and booked it is I need to return confirmation back to Vapi through my webhook so that the voice assistant can confirm with the customer who's still on the phone. This is all happening, in like a second or 2. So let's go grab a webhook. The only action we can take is a webhook response because we're not at the beginning of a scenario, and that makes sense. So you can leave this status to 200. That just means it was successful. And in the body, this is what the voice assistant is going to see. The appointment was, I could get more fancy with this, but I'm just going to tell it that we successfully booked the appointment. Okay, so that's it for the free option on the router. So now we need to go figure out what we're going to do if the time is busy. Okay, so first off, I'm going to click on this filter. I'm going to name it busy. And I could put a condition in here that says if the array is greater than or equal to 1, but because basically this should be anything other than the time is free, I can also just select yes and call this a fallback. So what that means is if it doesn't successfully go through this one, it will automatically go through this one. Okay, the next thing I need to do is I want to look at the entire day that the caller is trying to schedule an appointment and see if I have any other openings on that day. Now we could obviously expand how we do this. We could check multiple days. We could go back to them and ask if there's a different day. But to keep it simple in this case, I'm just going to look for other openings on that same day that I could suggest to them. So you're going to go to Google Calendar, same thing we did before, get free busy information. But this time we're going to change the minimum and maximum time. Before we were just looking at the actual time that they requested. So if they asked for 2 p.m., we were looking from 2 to 3 to see if we were busy. Now we want to look at the entire day. So we need to take that day that they asked for, but open up the window of time. So to do that, I'm going to be operating off of this converted date. That's kind of like my anchor point. Everything's going to be based on that. That's the day that they asked for. So this includes a time the way it's set up right now. Remember, it's the date and the time. So what we want to do is go into this date and time menu, and we want to parse the date. And then I'm going to put my converted date right in there. So what this is going to do is I'm going to be able to keep as much of that date as I want to and get rid of the rest. So in this case, I want the day. I don't want the time. I want to get rid of the time. So I am going to, after the semicolon, give it this format, the year, the month, and the day. Get rid of this so you can see that. So that will just keep the date, but it will get rid of the time. Okay, so now I just have the date. And the next thing I want to do is I want to add another function that is called set hour. So let's go up here to the beginning. We're going to click set hour. And I'm just going to delete the second parentheses and the semicolon so that all of this is within that function. So that's going to take the date that I give it, add the semicolon back, and I'm going to just put 9. So that's going to take the date that they asked for and return that date at 9 a.m. That's the start time that I want to check. And now I'm going to do the exact same thing for the maximum time, but just put the end of the day. So in this case, if I want to do 5 p.m., that would be 17. I need to select a calendar. So this will return all of the busy slots on that day. So everything else we'll assume is free. So let's test this. We're going to run this and just give it this date and time. And the output is we have 3 conflicts on that day. One at 12:30, one at 2, or one from 2 to 4. That's probably 2 appointments, and then at 4:15. So if I check this, that's exactly what I've got. 12:30, 2 to 4, and then at 4:15. Okay, so that's everything that's busy. I'm going to pass that into OpenAI, but I found it's easier if I convert that to JSON first. So I'm going to add a JSON and transform to JSON. And the object I'm going to give it is from this second Google Calendar. And I want to give it this busy array. And it's showing me a warning just saying this JSON transformer shouldn't be the last thing in my scenario, but we're not done yet. Okay, so the next thing I want to do is I want to pass that information back into OpenAI, create a completion. Model is GPT-4o. And now the prompt I'm going to give it, this is going to be a little more involved prompt than the first one, which was just asking it to interpret what the date and time is. This one, I am going to, let's expand this. I'm telling it that someone's asking for an appointment, but the time's unavailable. And that I'm going to give it the time they asked for and a list of times that I'm busy. Now, a note about time zones. There's a couple ways you can do this. I've just been clear in my prompts what time I'm giving it, and it's also included in the formatting. So like when I get the output from this, so you can't really tell from here, but this calendar is in Eastern time zone. So when let's run this. Let's run this JSON. Okay, so I just ran the JSON module and I just manually pasted in my times. So you can see what it comes out with. I have a start and then the start time. So this is in what's called the ISO 8601. This is like kind of the standard date time format. So you see this -5 means it's in Eastern time. If there was a Z there instead of the -5, that would stand for Zulu, or UTC, which is like the time that all the other world's times are based off of, right? So Eastern time is 5 hours behind that. So I've just been really clear in my prompts, whether I'm talking about Eastern or UTC time. You could convert everything. I could have asked it to convert to UTC time in this prompt, but I told it was Eastern, and so it worked out the same way. So in this prompt, I'm telling it, I'm going to give you a requested appointment time in Eastern time and a list of busy times in UTC. I probably don't even need to say that because the way these date formats come in, it should know what those are. I'm then asking it to suggest up to 3 alternate 1-hour appointment slots that are exactly an hour long. They fall between 9 a.m. and 5 p.m. Eastern, and they do not overlap in any way, even partially, with busy times. If it doesn't have 3, give me as many as you can. I gave a little more details on the overlap to make sure it was getting that right. And then the output format I want is in JSON. And I gave it the format here, and I want the variable to be alternate times. Okay, so here's where I need to give it the actual times that it's working with. So the requested appointment time is still converted date. That's down there. And then I'll just call this busy times is going to be this output from the JSON module. And I'm going to put, just so we're totally clear, that's in UTC. Okay, so here's my busy times. That comes from the JSON string that I just made. And then the last thing I need to do, again, because I'm asking for JSON, I'm going to go down to the advanced settings until I want a JSON object parsed. Okay, so now if I test this OpenAI module, the JSON string I'm going to give it has a couple of busy times on that day. And then I'm going to give it a date, the date and time that was requested, which is in conflict with, should be in conflict with that. Yeah. Okay. And so what it came up with was alternate times. So I had asked for 11 a.m. and there was a conflict at 11. So I asked it to look for 3 other times. It came up with 9 a.m., 12, and 1. So it came up with 9, 12, and 1. 11 was the time that I told it was busy and that the caller had requested. So 9 to 10 was a slot, 12, and 1. So that's working as well. So the last thing I can do here is another webhook response back to Vapi. You can leave this as 200, and in the body, you can suggest some alternate times. So I give it a short message that's going to go back into the voice assistant that the time they asked for was not available, but here's some other times that are available. And then I'm going to grab this alternate times array and pass that back into Vapi. So there you have it. We just built an assistant that will interact with the customer on the phone. We'll ask them when they want to meet. We'll pass that information into make.com, figure out what the actual date and time is, see if we're busy. If we're not busy, we're going to schedule an appointment and let them know. If we are busy, we're going to come up with some other suggestions and give that back to them. And then the voice assistant is set up to, if they were to confirm, yeah, one of those alternate times works, it would come back through this same scenario and schedule that time because it's a free time now. This could be a really useful tool if you're spending a lot of time scheduling over the phone and want to automate that. We could also set up in here, we could send ourselves an email each time we got an appointment and let ourselves know. And there's a lot of additional things we could add to this. So I hope that helped. Please let me know if you have any questions, drop them below, and I'll see you next time. Thanks.